You probably think Vaseline was invented on purpose. As a medical product, designed in a lab, tested, approved, and released with a clear goal in mind. That story feels safe, logical, clean, but it isn't true. The real story doesn't begin with medicine at all. It begins in oil fields, where drilling equipment was constantly fighting against heat, pressure, and friction. Metal rods went deep underground and came back coated in a thick, sticky substance. Workers called it rod wax. It slowed the machines down. It clogged parts. It caused delays. And for the people working there, it was nothing more than an annoying byproduct. Something to scrape off and throw away. At first, nobody paid much attention to it. Why would they? Oil drilling already came with enough problems. But over time, a few workers noticed something strange. When this residue touched their skin, especially small cuts or burns, it didn't irritate it. In some cases, it seemed to help. Not by healing anything, but by covering the wound, sealing it off from air, dirt, and bacteria. That observation didn't spark a breakthrough. In fact, it was mostly ignored. Because here's the thing. Not everything useful looks important at first. And not everything important is recognized when it appears. The story shifts when a chemist named Robert Chesebrough encountered this substance. He wasn't looking for a miracle cure. He was interested in something much less glamorous. Stability. The residue didn't rot. It didn't dry out. It didn't change over time. In a world where many substances spoil quickly, that alone was unusual. But there was a problem. What came straight from the oil fields wasn't safe. It contained impurities. Left untreated, it could actually cause harm. Early versions were inconsistent, unreliable, and unsuitable for medical use. So the next phase of the story isn't about discovery. It's about persistence. Chesebrough spent years refining the material, filtering it, purifying it, removing components that made it dangerous. What remained was a neutral, semi-solid substance that could sit on a shelf indefinitely and behave the same way every time. That substance became petroleum jelly. This is where the popular myth usually takes over. The story people like to tell is that Vaseline was immediately embraced by doctors and hospitals, that it was welcome as a medical innovation. That part isn't true either. Medical professionals were skeptical. The idea of putting something derived from petroleum onto the human body didn't inspire confidence. Oil was associated with industry, dirt, and machinery, not care, not healing. To overcome that distrust, Chesebrough did something unusual. He demonstrated the product on himself, publicly. He applied it to cuts and burns to show that it didn't cause harm and that it protected the skin. These demonstrations helped, but even then, adoption was slow. And here's the part most people miss. Vaseline didn't spread because it was revolutionary. It spread because it was practical. It was cheap to produce, easy to store, stable in any climate. It didn't require refrigeration. It didn't expire quickly. As oil production expanded, petroleum jelly became easier to manufacture at scale. Pharmacies stocked it. Households kept it. Not because they understood its origin, but because it worked well enough and was always there when needed. Quietly, its identity changed. What began as unwanted residue from oil drilling equipment stopped being seen as an industrial byproduct. It became a familiar object, something you keep in a drawer, something you don't think about. And that transformation is the most important part of the story. Because once a product becomes ordinary, people stop asking questions about it. They stop wondering where it came from. They stop connecting it to the systems that made it possible. Vaseline is now associated with care, protection, and everyday comfort. Its origins in oil fields feel distant, almost irrelevant. But they aren't. They're a reminder of how often modern life is shaped not by grand design, but by small observations, practical decisions, and materials pulled from the ground for completely different reasons. So here's the question worth leaving open. If one of the most familiar products in your home began as an unwanted oil residue, how many other everyday objects around you share similar origins that you've never stopped to question?